Freedom's greetings, Helldivers. Erevan here, and today we are taking a look at the 60-day plan patch part 2 that just released. As promised, Arrowhead has delivered on a second massive change up to the balancing of the game with some critical, highly requested fixes and buffed just about every weapon and stratagem that they missed on the first pass, while also addressing some of the concerns we had when it comes to the Glass Divers situation that they created in the previous patch. We've, as always, got a lot to cover for this patch day, so let's get into it, shall we? Starting off with the balance adjustments and gameplay changes, Ricochet has been removed from orbital stratagem projectiles, Eagle 1 bombs, and the spear, meaning these weapons no longer have zero armor penetration when it comes to extreme angles and can never have their damage negated within their effective blast or kill zones by angular armor. This was a very important change for a lot of Helldivers, considering the first time I saw a video of an orbital rail cannon strike bouncing off the back of a Bile Titan, I definitely thought to myself about how Arrowhead really had to lock in on this. Glad they made good on it. Addressing the Glass Diver's allegation slightly, we have received a minor adjustment to both ultralight armor and heavy armor, curving the damage we take slightly in light of the massive amount of damage we had been receiving due to the additional body and arm damage added last patch. Ultralight armor users will now receive 125% base damage compared to 133%, and 150 heavy armor suits now receive 75% damage down from 80%. How this change reflects in the other armor levels of it all, I'm not really sure yet. It's 6 a.m. as I'm writing this. But if it ends up being a significant shift in damage received, I'll be sure to follow up on this in the future and update our charts in my Discord on the subject. We've also received some much needed improvements to the in game UI, although still a far cry from the original vision that Arrowhead had for the weapon statistical descriptions. Weapons now properly convey their armor penetration levels within the game. AP2 represented as light armor penetrating, AP3 is medium armor, AP4 is heavy armor, and AP5 as anti tank. This helps clarify the difference between AP4 and 5 within the game, as previously AP4 was tagged as light vehicle penetrating, something that you only really knew what it meant if you'd been around for a while, so this clarification is a good first step, although far from what the game needed in this regard. We want more stats, Arrowhead. That should be evident by the fact that I have a job. Now, getting into the meat of this patch, we've got a large list of weapon changes, starting with the plasma weapons as a whole. Their projectiles now have a uniform characteristic, slowing down faster than other weapons, but still fire projectiles at different speeds individually, keeping all of the plasma weapons' effective ranges distinct. In the case of the Plasma Punisher specifically, you're going to see less of an arcing nature in the projectile, which is, in my opinion, actually kind of a nerf to its functionality, as its ability to function as a mortar that could be fired from the safety of cover was the one thing keeping it from being completely eclipsed by the exploding crossbow. I'll definitely have to get some more trigger time with it, but my initial impression of this change is not a good one. The Plasma Punisher also did get a modest recoil reduction and 25% fire rate increase, though, so maybe it's a bit better than I'm giving it credit for. We'll have to see. Speaking of weapons living in the crossbow's shadow, the Purifier has finally received its long awaited buff, now able to fire much quicker than before with variable charging capability similar to a railgun. After zero point 0.1 seconds, the weapon deals an additional 50% damage with a very small explosive AoE, sporting only a 1 meter inner radius and 2 meter outer radius, totaling at only 75 damage. Charging the weapon all the way up for the full 1 second, however, the damage of the projectile itself is increased by 100%, going from 100 to 200, with an explosive endpoint inner radius of 2.9 meters and an outer radius of only 3 meters, meaning the 300 explosive damage the full charge deals is essentially consistent throughout its entire blast radius with no fall off outside of that last zero point 0.1 meter. To the weapon's credit, this means it now shares many breakpoints with the crossbow when charged up, and can be fired much quicker to dispatch lighter enemies as needed. As far as ammo efficiency, it's now much more friendly than the crossbow in this regard, although the crossbow is going to dominate when it comes to the area of effect department, sporting a much greater blast radius than the Purifier. The weapon is definitely a contender now, though, and you should give it a try on your next Automaton Helldive to see how you feel about it. And after that, give the Plasma Scorcher a try because this change sounds awesome. The Plasma Scorcher is now an automatic weapon with a 20 round magazine and a fire rate up from 250 to 350 RPM. It lost one spare magazine down from 6 to 5, but you still end up with 15 more rounds than you did previously overall. The Plasma Scorcher used to be the king of the Western Front on the game's launch, so I'm super excited to see how an automatic Plasma Scorcher can perform. Given you're now going to be shredding through ammo much faster thanks to the buffs, though, the supply backpack is more likely than ever to be married to this weapon, though. The Liberator received a 30% reduction to horizontal recoil that those of you who like it will be glad for. Horizontal recoil feels awful in PvE co op shooters, and in my opinion, should stay in competitive PvP shooters where it belongs, as I definitely don't want to be memorizing spray patterns for a weapon only spitting 70 damage per round in this game. The Liberator Penetrator also received the same horizontal recoil reduction of 30%, but in addition now has a magazine capacity of 45 up from 30, at the cost of 3 spare magazines, gaining 30 extra rounds overall, while requiring less time reloading, allowing for more time spent penetrating. It's not likely to become a fan favorite thanks to these changes, but less reloading on my automatic weapons is always a good thing, and we are inching ever closer to no longer having Super California compliant firearms in Helldivers 2. The Liberator Carbine received the same horizontal recoil cut of 30%, as well as a small ergonomics improvement from 65 to 70, which basically just means it handles slightly better than before when it comes to swiveling, and a small reduction to the time it takes to reload from 3 to 2.5 seconds. This feels like a miss with this weapon, especially because I'm constantly reminded this is the Helldivers 1 Patriot repainted with 30 less rounds in the magazine. Arrowhead needs to give this thing the 75 round drum it had in the first Galactic War, or I'm just not interested. Now, what I am interested in, however, is the Adjudicator. I absolutely hated this weapon's recoil, not feeling the weapon's damage justified such poor handling. And while there are those that coped by just using burst fire or tapping, I would always question why those same players didn't just bring the much better Diligence Counter Sniper if they weren't planning to use their automatic rifle on automatic. The 30% reduction in horizontal recoil is massive for this weapon, as you'll now be able to more consistently just drag down to compensate the recoil on automatic, for some much better DPS finally justifying the pick. Furthering this, we see a damage increase from 80 all the way up to 90 per bullet, nearly as high as the Tenderizer, improving several secondary breakpoints across the game, and a durable bump from 16 to 23. A medium penetrating lead spitter like the Adjudicator has always had the potential to be a very convenient firearm to use on both fronts, but with that recoil reduction relaxed, it should now be a much more reliable pick overall. The Tenderizer, not wanting to be left out of the assault rifle buff party, received a very fun modular fire rate edition now able to swap from 600 RPM all the way up to 850 RPM, cranking its theoretical burst DPS, not including reloads when mag dumping, from 950 DPS all the way up to 1345. When you dump the magazine on the Tenderizer with this setting, it's going to absolutely shred whatever's in front of you. And with its very comfortable 10 recoil, you shouldn't have any trouble maintaining control on this new setting. And the most important weapon change of all, the Jar 5 Dominator has finally realized its projectiles deal no explosive damage and has been moved from the explosive category to the special category where it belongs. We knew you could do it, Dominator. Still every bit the powerful weapon it was when ran alongside the peak physique passive to get around that god awful swivel speed, but with all these weapons being buffed, it's definitely fallen back towards the middle of the pack when it comes to the top tier picks for bot stomping. That does it for our primary weapon changes, so now we're getting into the sidearms. The verdict has seen a massive buff going from class 2 penetration up to class 3, with an extremely large increase to its durable damage all the way from 13 to 32. Basically, if you were a fan of this weapon before, or you enjoyed the Senator, but you wanted more ammunition to play with and better handling, the verdict is now a very considerable option for you, although this change has left the poor little Peacemaker in the dust. Not that many players enjoyed it besides me, anyways. Speaking of the Senator, the big iron on your hip has seen an increase in penetration from class 3 up to class 4, walking through the door the crisper opened for it, now able to deal damage to Chargers, Titans, and Hulks through their faces. and with a damage increase from 175 to 200, and a substantial durable damage increase from 35 to 70, it's now going to be a very reasonable answer to both Rocket Striders by shooting them through their crotch plate, and even Hulks if you land 3 shots to the eye. A very significant buff for all you gunslingers out there. The stim pistol has become a beloved addition to the game for many would-be medics, but the projectile speed of the darts made it absurdly difficult to heal Helldivers when they were on the move. So the spread of the weapon has been reduced by 40%, and the muzzle velocity increased by 150%, making it much easier to hit your shots, making it a much more reasonable addition in an organized team composition planning to stick together. Moving on to the throwable grenade slots, the throwing knives, ever the meme option, now drops you with 20 knives up from 8, allowing you to fling to your heart's content, especially when armed with a supply pack. I haven't yet tested if the bug still exists this patch, but if you can still use throwing knives against enemies and get absolutely no reaction out of them when you're not the host of the game, this amount of throwing knives is actually going to make that playstyle extremely fun. The high explosive grenade, frag grenade, and incendiary grenades all received much needed 50% base damage increases to help them keep up with impact grenades and the golden child of the patch, the thermite grenades. High explosive grenades now deal up to 800 damage, making them a great deal more viable for taking out Hulks in particular, but I can't say any of these grenades will ever be my choice going forward unless I need a spawner killer. At least they make chaff dead within their radius now instead of being a complete joke. Getting into the support weapon class changes, the autocannon now can toggle between flak rounds and armor piercing rounds by holding reload. These new flak rounds are proximity triggered like the airburst launcher and cause large explosions of shrapnel upon detonation with a lesser armor penetrating value, but much greater area of effect than the standard rounds, making it an ideal toggle for when you need to blow away groups of chaff targets. This is also the first time the autocannon has ever been changed in Helldivers 2, hilariously, and it's basically now the airburst launcher in addition to all the qualities that made it own the entire game for months. Good for it. In similar fashion, the Recoilless Rifle can now toggle between anti-tank shells and high explosive shells by holding reload. This new shell has a very large explosive radius at the cost of its projectile damage and armor penetration, allowing you to toggle your rocket launcher for chaff clear or medium clear as necessary. I can't say I'm likely to utilize this feature with how I want those precious fleeting 7 rockets for anti-tank and fabricator clear, but it's a nice little addition all the same, and a clear precursor to the weapon customization Arrowhead is still cooking up in the background. Now, both of these weapons have hilariously just become better than the airburst launcher in every way, so what did they give it, you might be wondering, to compensate? Its abysmal 7-second reload has been reduced down to 5 seconds and is still a one phase reload that you can't cancel at any moment to make any faster, and the weapon itself is now basically worse than an autocannon in flak mode. Should probably just scrap this weapon and replace it with something actually good at this point. The Stalwart change Pilestead said he was excited for turned out to just be an ergonomics improvement, generally improving its handling, so that was a huge bait. Make this weapon a primary already, the way it was meant to be, Arrowhead. You know you want to, you know we want you to. Let's just make it happen, eh? Moving on. The MG43 has received a magazine capacity increase from 150 to 175 and a much needed additional spare magazine going from 1 to 2 spares. Overall, this gives the weapon 225 more rounds before empty compared to last patch, a very substantial increase in firepower that has likely moved it up a tier in reliability for those that enjoy it. Now, the last 60-day patch absolutely shafted the heavy machine gun, lowering its durable damage to only 35, the same amount the MG43 has, as well as destroying its angular armor penetration from 4 to 3. So, how did they make this right? Well, they increased the magazine capacity from 75 to 100. That's it. Yeah, gotta say that wasn't on my bingo card. Really was hoping they would walk back that durable damage nerf and bad angle penetration reduction they snuck in originally. Not a fan of this weapon anymore, and hoping they continue to listen to feedback in this regard, as it was done very dirty last patch, and this did not fix it. That's it for support weapons, so let's look at the long awaited jump pack change. A cooldown reduction of 25% going from 20 seconds to 15, as well as a significant improvement to its thrust, allowing you to jump slightly higher and maintain more forward momentum for an all around better feeling jump pack. I'm sure there were those of you who wanted something a bit more interesting here, but these changes are still solid all the same. The Liberator Guard Dog has had its weapon swapped from the basic Liberator to the Liberator Penetrator, giving it Class 3 armor penetration, 45 round magazines, and 60 damage down from 70. Considering this weapon aims for heads, this change is going to be most notable against Terminids, as they have the only armored heads in the game that can benefit from that penetration, making it much more effective at countering threats light armor penetrating primaries find difficult to deal with, like Hive Guards and Alpha Commanders. These changes are good, and this guard dog is still plenty viable on the automaton front where it head pops devastators. But it's not likely to challenge Laser Buddy's infinite battery supremacy over the eastern front despite its high volume of friendly fire incidents. For both the guard dogs, however, you can now toggle them back into your backpack using your backpack bind, allowing you to save the penetrator guard dog's ammo and run these stratagems without them giving away your position as a stealth enthusiast. As someone who very much enjoys stealth, you might see me actually running the penetrator guard dog against the automatons, now thanks to this quality of life improvement, as I've no reason to not have one from either my loadout or a teammate when running support weapons that do not require a backpack. As far as stratagem changes, there are many. The strafing run, something that's become a favorite of mine against the automatons, has had its explosive damage increased from 250 to 350 per blast, and the radius of those explosions tuned up, making it substantially more reliable at making medium enemies within that firing line deleted from the map. A great change for an already great stratagem for its omnidirectional fabricator clear and patrol deletion. The orbital airburst strike went from 3 to 4 blasts, and the time between salvos has been increased from 3 to 4 seconds, allowing it to better compete with the Gatling barrage and lock down an area from medium to small threats for a longer period of time. Overall, solid buff. The machine gun and Gatling sentries have received substantial magazine capacity improvements, with the machine gun going from 125 rounds all the way up to 175, and the Gatling from 400 to 500 rounds, allowing them as well to lock down an area for a more substantial amount of time. In addition to this, though, these sentries, as well as the autocannon and rocket sentries, have all had their cooldowns reduced by 30 seconds. The machine gun all the way down to a 90-second cooldown, with the other three going from 180 to 150 seconds, making these stratagems much more reliable in the moments you need to lock down enemy chaff. All around, pretty solid buffs. Speaking of solid buffs, the anti-tank mines have received an incredible one. The mines are now only triggered by heavy units, and Helldivers are not heavy units, so this is a fantastic change and something we've been asking for since the day it came out. They also deal an absurd 2,000 damage up from 800, meaning any Hulk, Factory Strider, or Charger trying to get through these is going to have a very bad time. The explosive radius was reduced, but this is more of a buff than anything, as they'll be less likely to detonate each other while still taking that tank busting damage against any tank class enemies that step on them. Now, the Tesla Tower now fires 3 times as fast and has received the same cooldown decrease as the other turrets, making it extremely potent for locking down an area and perma stunning the enemy to death, including chargers. This is now likely a very reasonable stratagem to take during defensive operations as a result. Massive buff to this thing. Like, insane buff. Now, much less impressively, the shield generator relay got some very mixed changes. It now constantly heals itself while deployed, regenerating 400 health a second, but its radius has been increased from 8 meters to 15, making it soak much more enemy fire than ever before. So it's still going to be dying pretty quickly. The shield also no longer regenerates at all when it hits 0 HP, and it's still going to disappear 30 seconds after landing, regardless of the state it's in. This stratagem will still be fun to pair with the HMG emplacement, but otherwise not a great choice for anyone in particular over things that just go boom. We've now finally made it to the all important gameplay and enemy changes. First of all, when the map is now cleared, enemy patrol spawns will be centralized around extract, both making extraction more dangerous and intense, while relaxing the rest of the map for those that want to collect samples. The best way to utilize this change is to get Pelican 1 in the air earlier in the mission using this trick found in this video, so he can lay down some covering fire for you as you finish clearing the map and allow for a safe extraction where you don't need to deal with that increased spawn rate. Learn this trick, use this trick, love your best stratagem, Pelican 1. Hunters now have a short shared area cooldown on pouncing, meaning you will no longer be spammed with pounces by groups of hunters, as they now take turns like they're playing a JRPG. They also gib completely when taking enough damage, which is great from a cinematic point of view, same as the scavengers now do as well. Pretty cool change. Now, we have now made it to my favorite and most anticipated fix of all. I have been waiting for this since the game released. The automatons will no longer shoot at you through walls. They'll no longer track you while you should be hidden from them, and they will no longer ignore smoke effects. My ghost diving brothers, our time has come. The soft aggro bug is no more, and we can finally commit our ninja war crimes consistently and effectively. This is the single best fix my community has ever received, and a very good excuse for those of you interested in stealth gameplay to brush up on my previous videos on the subject, although they are quite old now. I will be making a new Ghost Diver's Guide to the Galaxy, covering every single stealth tip and trick I've ever put out to the community in one easy to find single video later this month, accompanying this absolutely game changing fix. In other news, finally addressing the glass diver issue as well, we've seen the automaton small projectiles used by devastators, turrets, and troopers reduced by 12%, down from 40 to 35. We also got a very minor tweak to the heavy projectiles wielded by the heavy turrets and the striders from 65 to 60. This will help alleviate the absurd TTK imparted on us from the original 60-day patch, but even with this and the armor change combined, we are definitely still much squishier than we were before the patches. And there was no reduction to the claw damage previously, also boosted 25% for the Terminids. We'll need some time hands on with the patch to feel out if these changes were enough, but they were steps in the right direction and targeted the biggest offenders, even if the Rocket Strider's missiles went unchanged somehow. Maybe next time, Rocket Striders, I do not know how you escaped this patch. The Hulk Bruiser, though, has had John Helldiver sent to its production facility where he sabotaged their new bunker turret arms, forcing them to revert to the rocket launcher. This was definitely a cute way of writing this note, and I did get a laugh out of it. The Bruiser having a bunker turret arm was extremely oppressive. So I am very glad that they did away with this change, as it super sucked. Devastators had their heads reverted to having no armor, with a small health bump from 100 to 110. These enemies are now a two-shot kill for every single weapon in the game, outside of losing damage from fall off at range, making a whole host of light penetrating automatic weapons much more viable against the automatons as a result. In similar fashion, the Berserker heads were also reduced to 110, meaning the same exact thing is true for them as well. Every weapon is now a two-shot headshot for those, if not a one-shot. Good stuff. Also, the heavy devastators have had time between volleys increased, allowing for a bigger window to counterattack. This is a really important change for me, as a couple heavy devastators catching you out basically meant guaranteed death. This change at least allows for a less oppressive experience when peeking them from behind cover. Assuming the Rocket Strider lets you stay behind it, that is, as they still haven't fixed explosions carrying their pushing force through walls yet. All tanks have had their front armor reduced from 6 to 5, meaning it no longer requires a skill shot on the barrel when destroying them using non spear AT weapons. They've also had their back weak point reworked to be a separate health pool equal to the old tank turret's max HP, making it far easier for the railgun as well as class 4 support weapons and grenade launcher to destroy them through it. As an example, the grenade launcher now destroys tanks in just 3 blasts connecting with this new weak point, making it extremely effective at anti-tank and turrets. They have also fixed the Barrager tank's turret not being destroyed when the body is, making the lower back of these tanks a viable way to eliminate them with class 3 penetrating weapons or greater. All around, great changes to this enemy, although I feel that class 6 front plate could have stayed. Having to aim for the center of the gun or barrel with a recoilless rifle was good skill expression in my opinion. Some top priority issues have been solved, and the Eradicates now spawn enough enemies to clear them, as well as many crash fixes and miscellaneous. Oh no, the miscellaneous changes. Yeah, as you would expect in true Arrowhead fashion, they didn't forget to sneak in a little nerf under the cover of this section. Gas heavy armor can no longer reduce gas damage to 0, meaning no armor can do this now. I really don't know why they bothered when that gimmick wasn't all that powerful to begin with, but I guess they want it to be consistently worthless across the board to wear these armors. In other news, General Brash has returned from his vacation in Silent Hill. Somewhere I'll be taking a vacation to during the final week of October as well to celebrate Halloween on stream. Come see me if that sounds like a good time. All right, wow, that was a lot to get through. This patch certainly shook things up almost as much as the original 60-day plan, and there is barely a single nerf here with an incredible amount of improvements on our side of things. I can't wait to get invested in this new patch, test all the changes, and start bringing you guys some content on it. First of which is going to be a full breakdown of every weak point in the game for our enemies, talking about where to shoot, what to shoot them with, and how to be an overall more effective Helldiver. If that sounds like a video you'd like to see, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it popping into your feed. And now that we finally got the biggest balancing issues taken care of, we can get excited for the new content and DSS completion centered around the in-game holiday, Liberty Day on the 26th. Thanks for watching till the end, and have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time.
ETA T-minus 1 minute. 100 meters. Heavy, left, 50 meters.
I can do that.